This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth. Building wealth and protecting legacies since 2004. Invest better with Brenthurst.
I'm confused. So we've got the United States of America growing at 3.5% to 4% GDP. The United States of America's economy is 77 times the size of South Africa's. South Africa was, we thought, going to grow at half of that rate, actually under half that rate. But we know better. Surely, if somebody's doing better than you and they're much bigger than you, you should be clicking to or trying to replicate what they're doing. And what is it that they're doing that could be a very quick win for us, because we need that 4% growth?
And we can get to that 4% growth. I mean, there are signs. Just do the right thing, and we can get this economy to grow. Well, the Americans do many things different. And a very good example of what the Americans do different from, say, compared to the Europeans, for example, is the way that they treat money. And this is the topic. Don't let me start talking about this. I'm never going to end. But the Europeans, they, for example, are going to create a central bank digital currency, which will become effective in 2029. And that means a lot of control. So the Europeans approach, the ideology of the Europeans, control everything, tax everything, put rules and regulations on everything. While the Americans say, listen, we're not going to go the central bank digital currency route. We're going to go the stable coin route, which is give far more freedom to the private sector. But that's just one example. And the result of that is that the American productivity growth is more than double that of the Europeans. So that's the answer. Leave it to the private sector to do stuff. And in a weird way, that is what's happening in South Africa, because the same ANC that wants to centralize everything, control everything, and because of their mismanagement and their corruption and their incompetence, they're destroying the stuff. And guess what? The private sector is picking up the pieces. And that is part of the bright future of South Africa.
Pitt yesterday gave us a compelling argument for state proofing, Pitt Leroux. It was it was a strong argument for state proofing. I don't know if you absorb much of that, or if you actually agree with that's what we should be doing, state-proofing ourselves.
No, I didn't listen to Pitt. I was a little bit late. I didn't listen to that one. So help me out, and I'll see if I can.
Well, should we take responsibility for ourselves, for our education, for our security, for our local areas? I think one of the people today said we should have a whole lot of little Oranias, which sounded a little bit hectic, but
we have that actually already. If you go back to Gauteng, that's what we have, all these security estates. Where I live, for example, in Pretoria, I've got my own electricity, we've got our own boil water, we've got our own security. And so why do I need a state? I don't need. Waar's hier? Ek het jou nie nodig nie. Ek het jou nie nodig nie, by the way. I've got all of that. So in a way, that is exactly what we are doing. But there's something else that I think is more important. It's that if you look at the nature of economic activity today, it's not part of the... That's what I spoke about when I said about the farmers. The farmers, they didn't talk about farms. They didn't talk about tractors and things. They spoke about technology. They spoke about artificial intelligence, about genetic engineering, precision farming. That's the stuff that they were talking about. And that's all those things are service orientated. The stuff that's happening in the cloud. And that's one way of creating a state-proof organization. You do not need to belong to South Africa or to belong to Urania or for anything. You can join the Flat Earth Society if you want to, and you can even use their currency in the cloud. That's one way of state-proofing yourself.
So are the Cape Exit people smoking their socks?
They are. That's not a very clever idea for a number of reasons. It's always better to be part of a bigger thing. In fact, I would like to see South Africa being integrated much more with the rest of Africa. There are so many wonderful opportunities in Africa, and we can all work together. But I certainly do believe that the power should move down closer to the people. And in a weird way, that is actually what Karl Marx also said, by the way. The word Soviet in the Soviet Union is local authority. That's what it means. And the Soviet Union means power to the people as close as possible to the people. And in a weird way, I agree with Karl Marx on that one.
No, you've really confused me. So now, at the moment, there's a very small number of taxpayers who are paying for a very large number of non-taxpayers in South Africa. Now you say we must be part of the whole of Africa so we can pay for more?
No, that's certainly not what I'm saying. No, what I'm saying is that let's run our own affairs here, do our own thing here, but let's allow everybody to trade with whoever you want to, all over the place. That's what I mean.
Okay, no, thank you. I'm just double checking on that
And
one.
I kind of make a comment about your tax base,
Please.
a number that I've done. So the various ways of calculating this. Remember, you put money into the system and you get something out of the system. And what we do, and that's why I perhaps disagree a little bit with Nick, but there's this huge pressure on the fiscal accounts. Nobody wants to pay, but everybody wants to get. So there's this natural phenomenon, and that the states tend to get bigger and bigger and bigger because that's what we demand. People, I don't want to pay, so the state go and they borrow more money. And in the process, debt levels keep on going up until the system collapses, until there's some financial crisis or a war or whatever the case may be. Or somebody like Xavier Millet, for example, they really fix this. So that's what happens. So the reality is you pay some money into the system and you get some services, get something back. Now, yeah, depending on who you are, the higher your income, the more you pay and the less you get. And the lower, the opposite. The less you pay and the more you get in. But here's a rough number, a rough calculation. For a family earning about 2 million rand per year, for every 1 rand they pay tax, with the assumption that 1 rand goes in and 1 rand comes out on the other side, which of course is not the case. But let's assume that. So for every 1 rand they pay tax, they get back approximately 5 cents in the form of goods and services, which means that family carries 20 families for education, health services, policing, all these sort of things. There's dramatically redistribution.
Is there any indication of where the breaking point is, where that family says, no, too much?
We passed that breaking point already. And that is because I mentioned the Laffer curve, we passed that already. There's no way the Minister of Finance can increase taxes anymore. And the really unfortunate part, of course, we have to all pay our fair share. But what is the fair share? So what he has been doing, is been giving SARS more money. He's giving SARS more money, they're getting more aggressive, and effectively what happens, they take money out of the pockets of the productive side of the economy and give it to the unproductive side of the economy.
What did you think of the US ambassador's address here?
And again, I didn't listen to him this morning. Yesterday morning, I was a little bit late, but what I've heard is that, can I say this? It's a little bit like mini-me. Is that okay?
Okay. Meaning?
No, he's very much like President Donald Trump. That's what I mean.
Good or bad?
Boss, anyway.
Good or bad?
Is Donald Trump good? Donald Trump, like that's your question. Is Donald Trump good or bad? I listen to Donald Trump, and I know there are some fanatic Trump supporters here, so I'm going to get into trouble here. And I listen to Donald Trump sometimes, and he's actually quite a good speaker, I think. And sometimes I listen to him and I think this is the most amazing, incredible, clever guy I've ever listened to. And sometimes I listen to him and I said, oh my goodness, can anybody say it? Because he made big mistakes quite often as well. And I can give you some examples. His tariff thing, for example, that is just wrong. I've got questions about Iran. I'm not so sure about that. So the good thing about Donald Trump, I think, is that the world was moving in the wrong direction. Maybe some changes that we are currently seeing would have happened in any event. He was just the catalyst, is that the right word? To get things into, maybe that's a good thing. So perhaps it is a good thing. In total, looking before Trump and after Trump, I think we're in a slightly better world. Yes, I would say that. But there was a lot of mistakes made on the way as well. Maybe just something that this war in Iran that stood out for me, and I think somebody mentioned this. South Africa belongs to a group of countries called the BRICS countries. And it's good for us to belong to the BRICS countries because now we can use it to improve our trade relations and capital. We can borrow money from a BRICS bank and stuff like that. So there are some good things about this. But looking at the war in Iran, what just happened, it is very clear that the BRICS countries are a toothless monster because it's not a unified political force. They were talking about getting rid of the US dollar reserve currencies. It's bullshit. They're not going to do that. the BRICS countries. So that is very clear.
Anthony Ginsberg said something very interesting. He said South Africa should be taking its model from India.
Yes, very much. I think South Africa should take a model from India. And again, if you look at the big economies, the Chinese economy, and if there are questions about these economies, I will try to answer that. The Chinese economy, let me just explain what has happened, because some people mentioned a few things about it. They are exporting record amounts of money. They are doing very well. Their production, they've got the overproduction capacity, they've got deflationary problems, and they're actually accumulating a lot of dollars now at the moment. That is what happened to the Chinese. Their business model was a production model. Up to now, they're trying to move that into a consumption model. In the case of the Indians, they are a little bit closer to the west, and they're more service orientated. And they've got this Narendra Modi just entered into, and that's another good thing about Trump. He got Narendra Modi and the Europeans to settle on this free trade agreement between them. And Narendra Modi is also very close to the Israelis now. As well. And I think of all the big economies, the Indian economy is going to be the economy is going to take the world forward. They are growing at the rate of 8 to 9%.
Because they're putting India first.
They're putting India first, certainly, yes.
Just help me out with this one. The fact that South Africa seems to put China first, and that China is spending 4% of its GDP subsidizing its industries. Fact, that's what the IMF says.
In fact, it is a little bit higher. That is true. They are subsidizing. But look at it this way. If my neighbor every week he will chuck a lot of groceries over the fence, of course, that's a good thing for me, is it not?
Well, as long as you're not trying to produce wine as well.
Yeah, but in the meantime,
because there's no more wine for you. It's gone.
The question, Alec, and this is the mistake that you're making now. There are many groupings in any country. You've got workers, you've got entrepreneurs, you've got manufacturers, you've got politicians, you've got trade unions or whatever. And of all of those groupings, which one is the most important one? I can tell you what. The consumer. It is always about the consumer. It is not about industry. It is not about this and that. It is always about the consumer. And if the consumer can benefit from low, cheap Chinese electric cars, so be it. It's good for me. The car industry in South Africa has been getting subsidies for decades, and they still cannot compete internationally. Why must I keep on subsidizing them?
Good point. And I'm sure there are people reassessing that right now, because they're not going to be able to compete with the Chinese here or internationally the way things are going. Dawie, let's go on to the questions. Louis Moody's question is, your comparison of small and large farms refers, the problems are inflation, migration to the city. Okay. The question is, do you believe this trend can be reversed? In other words, the platteland becomes poorer, loss of schools, etc. And if so, how?
Yeah, I don't understand whether the person asking the question is in favor of urbanization or against that. But let me tell you what is going to happen.
I think he's against it. Yeah.
Against it, it sounds like it. What is happening in the world, all over the world, people do not want to live in rural areas. People do not want to stay there somewhere away. We are tropdieren. We want to stay in the cities. And in the case of South Africa, we are approximately 60% urbanized. It doesn't make sense to build a road that 100 people is going to use, where you can build the same road that 10,000 people is going to use. We have to encourage people to move to the cities. We have to build the necessary infrastructure for people to be able to live in the cities and to work in the cities as well. Why do you have these small farmers that are simply uncompetitive? There's no way they can compete with the big farmers. Those farms should all be consolidated into bigger farms and given it into the hands of the corporates, the real agricultural corporates, to run it properly. We have to encourage people moving to the cities.
Okay, Luca Buerta says, what salary would you suggest for a chairman of a company like Eskom? How else would you attract appropriate talent? One could make the point that the 13 million rand salary for the CEO was well earned, with a reduction of load shedding that was costing the country a lot more.
No, do you think there was a reduction in load shedding? I just gave you the numbers. That subsector in the economy, electricity, gas, and water contracted by 4.3% in real terms. That's the price that you paid for Eskom. You want to still pay him 13 million rand.
But my lights go on. And they didn't go on 2 years ago. That's what we as consumers think.
Yes, and they're going to increase prices by 9%. This year probably up to 12%. And that means that your salary must go up by 2% in order to get inflation down to 3%.
Let's go to Sandy's one here. Given the lack of jobs in South Africa, what is the harm of promoting subsistence farming so people can provide at least something for themselves and their community and hopefully provide alternatives to cheap, shitty food?
Okay, no, that's valid. The reason why we have subsistence farmers, the reason we have people sitting on the pavement selling tomatoes is because they haven't got a choice. That's all that is left. We have the absorption rate of labor in South Africa is 40%. That is the number that we have to look at. So of people that can work, 40% of them work. 20% are people like, for example, housewives and students and so on. And 40%, more than that, is actually out of work in South Africa. So we have 40% unemployment. And that's where you get the subsistence farmers and people sitting on a payment and so on, selling tomatoes and so on. We don't want them there. We want them to be part of the corporate environment. And go and ask them. Put that advertisement in. Sal jy gaan sit 'n advertensie in die koerant. Say you want to employ 10,000 people and you're going to pay them 10,000 rand per month. You're going to get 100, 200,000 applications for that. That's people work there because they haven't got a choice. That's why.
Last year, Capitec's Gerrie Fourie argued here that South Africa's true unemployment rate is closer to 10%, not the official 30%.
I know about that.
Citing massive undercounting on the informal sector. Can Dawie weigh in on this topic and also the taxable opportunity of the informal sector?
Yes, well, the informal sector is also taxed by way of indirect taxes, like, for example, sin taxes and a value-added tax and a fuel levy and stuff like that. So they're also part of the tax net, not fully. I mean, they don't pay income taxes, for example. But Gerrie is right, but he's wrong as well. He's right in the sense that people do not die of hunger. In fact, some people do die of hunger. But we don't see people dying of hunger despite the very high levels of unemployment. That simply means that they are keeping busy somewhere. And there are many economic activities that are just not captured in the official data. One important one is people renting out back rooms, for example. So he's right in that sense. But he's wrong in the sense of the methodology that is used to calculate what is called unemployment. The World Bank and these international financial organizations, they decide on a specific technique and a specific methodology to calculate unemployment, and Stats South Africa is doing it exactly that way. And based on that, you can argue that is wrong, and maybe we can change that, but based on the accepted methodology and definitions, we do have the official unemployment data as reported.
How old is your business?
My business is nearly 25 years old.
And how many times have you been in the CCMA unfairly?
We pay our people well. Now, there has been a couple of times when we were in the CCMA. That is one issue that we have.
But that's my point. If you, as an employer,
that is so.
Employ someone, just know you know.
Yeah,
and everybody sitting here knows there's no incentive to employ someone permanently in South Africa because you get nailed enough times, you just stop doing it.
Yeah, that is very true. But let me tell you, and we've got about 600 people or so working for us. But what I absolutely hate is all these other compliance nonsense that we have to follow. We're in the financial services industry. That means that if anybody gives me 20,000 rand to deposit, I have to go and contact them, to call the compliance people and do all sort of things. If I suspect somebody is involved in whatever, I have to call the compliance people and report people and stuff like that. And you have to fill in forms. And that's not only that, you also have to fill in forms regarding about the race. All this race and that race and this position. But that is the kind of stuff that really kills a business. This horrible red tape that we have to comply with every year.
If the debt of state-owned enterprises were to be consolidated with government debt,
then the debt to GDP ratio will go up by another R1 trillion, up to 90%.
90%. That was from Sydney Place. Aina. Okay, how do you assess the spillover risks to South Africa's economy if the US power drifts from limited conflicts into prolonged medium-scale wars, particularly in terms of energy prices, global capital flows, etc.? Two scenarios. Iran's war continues for longer than the 4 to 5 weeks that Trump thinks it's going to be, and Rob Hersov's thesis that the USS Abraham Lincoln is going to wend its way down to Simonstown.
To South Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the war goes on for, then the impact's it's already there. The shock is already there to the South Africa and to the global economy. We're going to pay a price for that. It's not necessarily the level of the oil price, but it's how long the oil price is going to remain elevated. That is actually more important, because the longer it stays high, the more it becomes part of the fabric of the economy, and the more difficult it's going to be to get that out of the inflation, to get inflation lower. So I'm more concerned not about this huge volatility. It's bad in the short term, but it's high levels. It's subsistently of levels that stays high for a long time that I'm more concerned about. I think the oil price should be below $70. It is currently, I don't know where it is at the moment because it's so very volatile, but it's around $80, $90, somewhere there. And hopefully we will see an end to this conflict. And I think we will see an end to this conflict relatively soon. Yeah,
why do you think that?
Because I think Donald Trump, that's how he is. I mean, he wants to make a quick buck and move on to the next flower. That's what he does.
But that's maybe not what Iran wants.
No, that's not what Israel wants. Certainly not. Iran pretends not to want that, but they're dead. I mean, they're gone. They're destroyed.
Do they care? Well, we'll find out more tomorrow from Iraj.
I think Iraj will tell us more. But your question about Simonstown, remember, about 20% of this total debt of the Minister of Finance is held by foreign investors. That's mostly Europeans and a bunch of Americans as well. Now, the Reserve Bank, the South African Reserve Bank, already indicated about 2 years or so ago that they're concerned about the South African banks holding too much government debt on their balance sheet. Now, I just want to make the point, the banks in South Africa are very healthy, very well regulated. There's no reason to be concerned about the banks in South Africa. But still, the Reserve Bank says, but listen, you guys, you're holding too much government debt on your balance sheet. I don't like that very much. Just watch that. Now, imagine a situation where the Americans say, listen, the Americans are not allowed to buy our bonds anymore. And they start selling our bonds, forcing the local banks to buy that, for example, or not even forcing the banks, but forcing somebody else to buy that, and the yields go up, and suddenly the banks' balance sheets are under pressure. And again, the banks are not there. And that can lead to a serious financial crisis, not because of the banks, but because of very high debt levels of the state.
1985.
That is exactly financial
Just
crisis.
explain to our colleagues here, some of them the younger, what happened in 1985 with the debt standstill?
Basically that. We had to repay debt. We didn't have the money to repay the debt. They started stopping buying our bonds, for example, and the banks started getting into trouble. Nedbank specifically was one of those banks that really could potentially have pulled over the whole financial system.
Interest rates went to?
Interest rates went to
25%. There was a guy called Frank Shostak. You remember Frank Shostak from Econometrics? I used to interview all these guys.
Much younger.
And he had his models. And his models said, you've been to your 40th budget. Don't tell me that. His models said interest rates would go to 25%. And he looked crazy. Then we had the debt standstill. Interest rates went to 25%. And there was massive disaster in South Africa's economy.
Just something important.
Can that happen again? That's my question.
Certainly. It can certainly. But more importantly, you're talking about the prime rate, I think it was. Went to 25% then. But there's another interest rate that's far more important, and that's a bond yields, the capital market interest rates. And the Reserve Bank has got very little control over that. The Reserve Bank can adjust short-term interest rates up and down, but not the bond yields. That's the capital market. And everybody is scared of the capital market, believe me.
Even our government?
They will become scared. Even Donald Trump is scared of the capital market.
So they don't need to send a aircraft carrier to South Africa. All Trump needs to do is say Americans can no longer own South African bonds. And hier kom kak.
Yeah, and also if you go to speak to BlackRock or any of the European asset managers and say, if you buy American bonds, you're not allowed to buy our bonds anymore, for example.
It's quite simple. Is it possible that he would do that?
I guess it is. Anything is possible with Donald Trump.
I was exploring something a little earlier with Nick Hudson. Is it possible that with the man in the White House now, if he gets that angry, that he could force American companies to leave South Africa? In other words, like the disinvestment that we saw in the 80s? And what would the consequence of that be?
Full real sanctions, full, complete, total. So trade sanctions and financial sanctions. That's what you're talking about, and I guess investments also. That will be very bad. Remember,
what's very bad?
Let me give you a number. Remember, the South African economy expanded at the rate of 1.1% last year. If we completely off AGOA, for example, and we do not get the benefits of AGOA, it's probably going to shave off 0.1, 0.2% off economic growth, which is not a big deal, really. But it is a big deal when you grow at 1.1%. If you're growing at 3, 4, 5%, then you shave off 0.2%, it doesn't matter. So that is the issue. It's not necessarily the number that matters, but the fact that we are not growing economically, everything adds up. And even a small reduction in economic growth is, in fact, a big deal.
Dawie, about 5% of eligible voters voted for the EFF. 5% of eligible voters, according to the figures that we know of who votes and who were registered and they could have voted and so on. Now, the EFF leader has said that the US ambassador must be expelled because what he said here yesterday. If that were to happen, and there were a reaction of the type that we're talking about now, how many people would it affect in South Africa? Just give us that. You said very bad. What's very bad?
Yeah. Many. And again, I think the context is very important here, that we've been getting poorer. Let me just give you a number. South Africa, the last couple of, there are two ways of measuring how we are doing. You can measure it against ourselves, and I can tell you we are the way we were 20 years ago in terms of per capita GDP, or we can measure us against other people, other countries. And just about in all cases, other countries are catching up with us and overtaking us. The Indians are past us. They were much poorer than us until recently. The Chinese are past us.
That's per capita.
That's per capita GDP, a dollar purchasing power parity. The Mauritians are past us, many other countries, even some of these smaller countries. Even Botswana is past us, by the way. Poor countries that are doing better. And in South Africa, we've seen an increase in absolute poverty. And in South Africa, we're seeing really kids dying of hunger. That is really what's happening. If we bring this economic growth down further, just keep it where it is, we will see an increase in poverty further and an increase of all these other things. Now imagine what's going to happen if you force this economy in -2 and -3 and -4%. Just imagine what's going to happen. It will be chaos. It will be a disaster.
But my thesis was, or not my thesis, but my Machiavellian kind of approach was, there might be people who want this to happen because they could pick up those American companies on the cheap through a disinvestment wave, in the same way as many people got very rich in the 80s when the Americans left.
You sound a little bit like Nick now.
No. I'm just giving a scenario to you, and I'm asking you to educate the politicians with the fire that they're playing with.
Yeah, let us understand, and we must understand this. It is not a matter of taking over or nationalizing a company and it's yours and you're going to keep on its business as usual. That's it. Very special skills are very, very scarce. And people running international companies, multinational companies are very special people. You can't just take them out and put somebody else in a thing it will be business as usual. That is not what's going to happen. The Europeans are finding that out, because they have nationalized, the Russians are finding this out. They've nationalized a lot of Western companies, and many of those companies are run into the ground because they haven't got the skills, the know-how to do that.
Okay, let's hope that message has actually landed where it needs to. Simon has asked, or Simon, what policies would you introduce if you were finance minister?
No, that's not good enough. You must make me a dictator at least. I mean... Okay, what policies will I use? Well, I can tell you a long list of things. One thing, I would love to be Minister of Finance. I will overhaul the tax regime. It will be the cheapest, the easiest, the simplest. I'd love to do that. I do not want to be the governor of the Reserve Bank because nothing to do. There's nothing left to do there. But I would love to be the Minister of Finance. There's a lot to do. But what I would do, and I can give you a list of things. We need to privatize. We need to overhaul the tax regime. We have to get rid of policies on this and that and the other. But I think there's another thing that we need to do, and it's going to sound very stupid and simple. But we've lost confidence in South Africa. Business people, we've lost confidence. See, listen to the speakers here. Talk to the people here. We don't trust the government. We don't see an economic future going forward. We don't see a future for our children in South Africa. We don't have confidence in the future of South Africa because nothing works. So do something that everybody will support you in, that will be cheap, and is likely to be a success. Just get one win. Just one. And then from there on, we can do the next thing. And that one thing is clean the place up. Clean this pigsty. Clean the place up. That's all.
Did you see when you came into Hermanus?
Yes, it's quite nice, yeah.
It's a good place,
It
this,
is.
eh? Dawie Roodt, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, South Africa's leading boutique wealth manager, trusted to guide families for over 20 years. Invest better with Brenthurst.